I'm not too sure it's a good thing to start talking about possibilities. I've heard stories.
I don't feel comfortable going to Priceville at all. I'm very nervous out there. And I just don't feel right out there, even though we have ancestors out there.
There were over 200 signatures on a petition not to disturb the place. Leave it quiet, leave it as it is. And nobody showed up today.
Now, we're not into a civil war around here. We're not fighting with each other openly. So there is some decorum that Canadians have achieved, even in struggles like this. But the misrepresentation of information can stagger you sometimes.
Today, there's no distinction on where a person is buried, meaning all peoples are buried in cemeteries or placed in crypts, regardless of their color or nationality. But once upon a time, we were buried in cemeteries of our own.
My name is Les McKinnon. When I was in grade 6, I had written a story about early pioneers in Grey County. And I told with some pride that Irish and Scottish settlers were the first non-native settlers in Grey County. It took me a good portion of the rest of my life up till now to realize that was bogus, that it was a lie of a sort, but I took every available document, every book that I could find, and seemingly they all had this same, almost verbatim, that Irish and Scottish settlers were the first non-native settlers in Grey County. But then stories were told to me about some of those early Scottish families that moved into southern Grey, particularly around Priceville, and how some of them had written letters back home to relatives in Scotland and described the dark people that they met here when they arrived.
My name's Carolyn Smarts, and I'm an archaeologist. Just a few miles west of here is the area of Priceville, which we know to have been a black community in about 1835. In the early 1830s, maybe even the late 1820s, there was a settlement of black families that moved up here probably from the Queensbush area in Wellesley Township, the Waterloo Township, the Brantford area, probably in that area. They moved up to a part of southern Ontario, along Highway 4, just west of Flesherton, on what was to become the Old Durham Road. And in fact, the local oral history says that some of them were veterans of the War of 1812 who had fought on the side of the Crown, the War of 1812, and had been given land, or been told they were going to be given land that was actually not ever granted.
My name is Stuart Muir, and I live at a suburb of Owen Sound, the Six Corners. Well, it'd just be hearsay, you know. Someone tells the other person, you hear it in a community. You know how things go. And you'd hear about this, and you'd hear about Colonel Price. I didn't know. I thought Colonel Price was a white man for a long time, and it turned out he wasn't. He was a colored guy. And I knew that Colonel Price, I'd been told, I didn't know, I was told that Colonel Price was instrumental in bringing quite a few of the colored people up to the Priceville area.
Priceville is not mentioned. The settlers of the Old Durham Road are not mentioned in the very few books on general black history in Canada.
There is a overriding conspiracy, a non-conspiracy maybe, of silence in the community where people just don't talk about it. And that's the way they were trained. don't talk. If you don't say it, it doesn't exist. And a lot of them were hushed up when they were kids. And for me, I've been difficult to shut up all my life.
Oh, I'm Helen Miller, and I live in Collingwood.
And I'm Alan Miller. I live in Collingwood.
Oh, go ahead, Denis, because I don't remember half of it.
My great-grandfather, Green, he was born out there in Priceville. And through the relations, they said that he was buried there. I don't know if my father was born out there or not. Because everything was so secret. Like, it's hard to get anything out of our parent, like, you know. Because they were still in that hiding stage. And they never said too much anything. So you more or less had to pick and pick and pick to find little things out.
My name is Louise Harding Davis. I'm the curator administrator of the North American Black Historical Museum. I'm a 7th generation Canadian. Parts of my family have been here since 1798. We came to Canada to embrace a type of freedom that was denied us throughout the whole of North America. Oftentimes we weren't necessarily appreciated. We weren't necessarily wanted. But by keeping a low profile, by keeping our own counsel, actually being secretive in the way we conducted ourselves, we were able to survive. And that stood us very well. We were so able to blend into the mainstream, people forgot we existed. Many people are told blacks only arrived here in the last 1 or 2 generations, but we've been here for a solid 200-300 years, and we are a part of what Canada stands for.
The people along the old Durham Road were there for probably 20 to 30 years, and then there was a diminution in the population, probably because local white settlers were forcing them out.
I do think that there was what story I did hear, that it was kind of mean that they just walk in and take all the head and get out of here. Now, that's not too fair in a way, I wouldn't think.
The whites got deeds and that to the land and everything, which we didn't get. Well, they just moved in and kept pushing them back.
And that problem, that tension between the black and white community continued right through the 1930s in that area till almost everyone who had been part of the Priceville settlement had gone.
I have nothing in my memory that would indicate that they would not be treated well, that they would not be treated just the same as your next door neighbor. There were people in the community. That's my recollection. That is the way my own people would look on them.
Well, they'd just be pushed off, and away you go out of here. That was all there was to it. They didn't have no deeds, no nothing, and that'd be it. It was, I've often heard some of the old timers say it was a shame that they were used the way they were. Now that's all I can tell you.
A lot of the families settled on land that was uncharted, that was unassigned. They squatted. They didn't own their land. And even though they tried to purchase it later, the land had already been divided and allocated, and because probably they were black, largely, the land agents were very unsympathetic to their situation, and even though they had cleared large amounts of their land, they had built homes, in many, many cases, African Canadian settlers were forced off their land.
I don't think they thought that we were human. I think this was the whole thing. Because why could the other people come in and get all this and we got nothing?
There's also some very sad oral history in this area about people actually being forced through violence to leave their homes. And that happened at Priceville. Communities emptied out. Areas where there had been black settlement eventually had smaller communities or no community at all, like it did at Priceville. Consequently, the cemetery is left behind. So you have a black cemetery, a black history of an area that is the only example of that, the only sign of that its community's existence is the cemetery that's remaining.
My name is Joyce Grimes. I moved to the Old Durham Road, River Route 3, Priceville, when I was 9 years old in 1940 with my mother, who subsequently married Billy Reed. And I lived there for several years and worked on the farm with my stepfather. I went to school at the Darky Schoolhouse, they called it then, on the Old Durham Road. And one day while we were working on the farm, I asked my stepfather why that corner of the field was fenced off. And he said, well, it was a black cemetery. And I said, well, what happened to the tombstones, or was there any?
My recollection of that cemetery is that it was just a field, part of the farm. They had cattle, sheep pasturing on it. It was just a pasture field. And it was later on, I don't remember when Bill Reed plowed it up, maybe put some potatoes on it.
We raised very good potatoes on that particular piece of land. They were excellent. They lasted well through the winter. They were good, big potatoes. We never had to buy any.
This Reed man was like I don't know what you'd call him. He didn't have any respect for anybody.
Bill, he was outgoing. He I doubt would be too sentimental about the people who were buried there. He wasn't just given to that sort of thing.
My name is June McLaughlin. I was born in this general area. Well, I remember my parents talking about the time when the cemetery was turned into a potato patch. Actually, I guess there was nothing the neighbors could do. I mean, that was on private land, and you can't go in and tell someone else what to do with his or her land.
we'd be looking for something. A block of wood was too big, and this was something flat. Just parts of stones or broken pieces. Because we used one, it is convenient. We played ball over at the schoolyard, and we used one for home plate. Yeah, name was on too. Oh yeah, pitch it to Maggie, yeah. Yeah, we used to say that. I think it was Margaret. I even remember of us playing ball over there a little bit, but it didn't lend itself to that because there were still, grave markings to some extent.
My father had heard about it, and they were upset. But what could they do? Because their word just wasn't heard upon. They couldn't fight. How could they fight when they were put down so much? You don't know what would happen to them, their families, or anything, because they would be desecrated as well.
Kind of a difficult thing to fathom, honestly. Cemeteries are supposed to be consecrated spaces. The remains of the people buried there are supposed to be hallowed. However, when you continue and you go back to the systemic and traditional thinking of people, desecrations can happen.
We had a group of interested volunteer citizens who felt that there was a need to address a gap in our local history. We had the founding meeting in my family home. The committee's work between November of 1989 and October of 1990 was focused on establishing that the cow pasture that was really a cemetery became public domain.
I had often thought there should be something done at the cemetery, and I was only too glad to join a committee to go ahead and see what we could do about restoring the cemetery there.
The committee set out to reclaim the cemetery as a cemetery, clean it up, beautify it if possible, and which is not easy because the ground over there is not all that great.
When our committee formed, one of the things that we had set for a priority was to try and locate descendants of those early black pioneers who we believe to be buried in that cemetery.
My great-grandfather Green was buried out there, and we'd like to find out more of the history of the Green side of the family. So that's why we joined the committee, to see what we could find out.
And I joined because of Mr. Handy, and I'd like to try and find out where he is related to me, because I understand that he is related.
We had been given information about an anonymous letter that had been written in 1952, suggesting that if there was to be a recovery of tombstones from that Darky cemetery, they should look in the stone pile north of the school. And so our project was to remove the stone pile to see if it had been used as a place to hide broken tombstones.
Well, it was a very emotional day. There were quite a few of us there working, digging those stones by hand and throwing them into the truck.
Well, I actually found the first piece. I've worked around gravel all my life, and I recognized stone that's had human hands to it. And I saw a small piece that had obvious markings on the edge of it. Turned out to be the very edge piece and a small corner piece of the tombstone of a man named Chauncey Simmons, actually Chauncey's son, Christopher. And Christopher died of one of the many epidemics that went through the area and killed people indiscriminately, no matter what color they were. But the stone clearly identifies his parents' names on it. And so we have this magical connection where the book Broken Shackles talks specifically about Chauncey Simmons. It's a small leather-bound book that was published in 1889. I remember smiling a lot that day. I remember that piece spurred the group on.
Everyone was so excited that we had found a few stones with some names on.
We were very, very happy that, we had proof that there was someone there, and because they said there was nothing there, there's nothing there. And then when the 4 stones was found, it gave us hope.
The cemetery was dedicated in October of 1990 by Lincoln Alexander, who was the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario.
You on the committee who had the foresight and the vision think that something like this is appropriate. I want to thank you. Your dedication, commitment.
I remember comments around at the time saying, this is the evidence we've been looking for. This is the proof that we need. This is the connection with the past.
A surprising thing to us why the black people, that are descendants from these people, never showed up to do any of this back 60 years ago or 70 years ago, because normally when you know that you have a burial ground somewhere, you look after it yourselves. You don't leave it just lie and then all of a sudden when somebody starts to reclaim it and that, all of a sudden want to jump in.
Oh yeah, the reason why there wasn't too much said is because our people weren't allowed out that way, like us from Owen Sound. And we wouldn't, you had to be careful when you went out that way because they just didn't want us out there.
They'd just be chased out or told. They were just told face to face, you can't come here. That's it. You're not allowed in here.
There was what they call the imaginary boundary line. And was handed down, if you go by so-and-so, you're gonna feel sorry that you did. So you just never went there. And you still have to be very careful out that way.
Sundown law is the law stating, particularly in areas like Leamington and Kingsville that I know of, that are no longer on the books, black people were expected to be off the streets of the town or out of the boundaries of the town by sundown. Now, that speaks to the fear again, that there must be something that would be terrible that would happen if black people were in that town after the sun went down.
We were warned to be careful out there.
Yes.
This was by white people. We went to their house and they told us to be very careful. Very careful. we were free as far as free is concerned, but in the States, they were told where they could go and where they couldn't go. Right straight, they knew right straight, they told them. And they knew that they couldn't get houses and things like that. But here it's so undercover. I mean, you can't, if I went down the street or something, and it's like if you want to buy something, they give you another excuse, where in the States they just tell you right out and out, you're not having it because of who you are. They just tell you right that, and they had signs up. There wasn't the signs here. We were just, it was sort of undercover.
As time went on, some of the committee wanted to do some more probing and digging to see if they could find more stones. And as I do not agree with the digging in a cemetery at all, I was against this, and I eventually quit the committee.
We received handwritten resignations by some people who felt that in order to follow up this information and do actual digging on the site, they didn't want to participate in that. They thought it was a desecration of graves. And in spite of the knowledge that no human remains would be disturbed, many people took this scrap of information and ran around the community squawking about it and created an atmosphere similar to the child story of Chicken Little, who believed the sky was falling because a piece of wood had came out of the fence and hit this poor young mentally challenged bird in the head.
My objection to the dig is twofold. I want to make it very clear that it's not a racial issue. If it had been, I wouldn't have been involved by reclaiming that cemetery for 10 years. One thing, I don't think it's ever right to dig in a cemetery.
And from my point of view, it's not just a case of scratching around in the ground and trying to find some evidence, but we were hoping to actually reclaim more tombstones with names on them.
The other concern is that I don't think there will be any gravestones found for one, so in one way I see it as a waste of money and effort.
It's a moral issue. Why should you be allowed to disturb a graveyard? Because it is illegal to dig in cemeteries. So why should all of a sudden it be legal for any color to start now digging in their cemeteries to find, as they say, their history?
The decision to move forward with that came with an important price tag. And that was a public meeting that took place in October of 1998 in the community center in Flushing. The trail of information has led us to use new technology to help us understand what's buried underground.
How come all these articles in the paper that have been printed, no council member has said anything? It has always come from West McKinnon.
It never has been our intention to make friction between the white and the black community.
We went to a public meeting to discuss with the community and specifically with the Artemisia Town Council or Township Council the possibility of proceeding because they own the land technically the cemetery is on. And there was some discussion in the meeting. There was some public protest about the idea of, I think most of the community members seemed most concerned about disturbing the dead. They were very loath to have any work done inside a cemetery.
If you want to put the stones on the right grave, are you then into DNA testing? Are you then going to have to dig up the remains and match them with the stone?
It's a very difficult thing to be doing.
I mean, I'm asking a question. I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but is that what you're then into? And should that be done?
Certainly at no point were we intending nor did we. Were we intending to excavate into any of the burials? The purpose was simply to reach the surface of the original ground surface at the time when the tombstones were plowed under, and not to excavate into the burial shaft of any of the graves.
There were over 200 signatures on a petition not to disturb the place. Leave it quiet, leave it as it is.
So my personal view on the petition, that it was a ruse and a deception to take us away from the real issue, which is that more than 4 people were buried in that cemetery. A young woman who was fairly new to the area found a photo album in the attic of a house on the Durham Road. And she was intrigued to see pictures of black and white people together. And not just in a sort of a social setting, but marriages, families, that were obvious evidence of intermarriage. When she took this document and showed it to some of the matriarchs of the community, she was advised to burn it. She was advised that the best thing she could do with it was to destroy it.
I don't know whether the mixed marriage thing is any concern. I think it used to be that the white people in the area that had any Negro ancestry didn't want to know about it, but I think that's pretty well past now. One member of our committee had a great-grandfather who was black.
My great-grandfather was of African descent. He married an Irish girl right from County Cork. I don't know how they met, where they were married, or any of their history until they came to the Old Durham Road about 1864.
There have been some extremely, I guess, unacceptable things done as a result of people being afraid that a tombstone or a public record will expose the fact that they themselves or their own family have some ancestry that is of a different ethnic origin.
Yeah, it is true. They did not want, because some of them worked in stores, some of them worked in different places there, and they were very fair. Like, you wouldn't know that, but they had Negro blood in them. But if they had said anything years ago, they wouldn't have their job. They were afraid of getting fired and things like that. So they could not tell. They had to just go and with their looks and hope for the best, that someone didn't recognize them and tell on them. So and now they don't even now, a lot of them will not admit that they have a Negro blood in them. But a lot of them we can look at and tell.
It's not only in Priceville, that's the whole area out there. It's all the same. They're all hiding their ancestry.
My name is Linda Johnson. When I was younger, I always painted, and my family has always been very important to me. And it's a way of documenting my heritage and my family. People look at me and they don't know who I am, and there's been times I looked at myself and didn't know who I was. Well, I lived with my grandmother and my step-grandfather from the age of 9. And when I was developing, going into my adolescence and teenhood, my step-grandfather would always say to me, he never wanted to see me with a black person, or colored person, as he would say, and that I was light enough that I could pass and have a good life. And I would always look at him because it never entered my mind to pass. And so when he would say this to me, it was so foreign. And there was a time where I actually told him that I would tell my grandmother that he was saying this to me. And he stopped saying it. And it's been very unique in a lot of ways, being the color that I am, because it totally catches people off guard. I've had even people of color deny my heritage. Like, say, there's no way you can have any black in there. There's no way. So it's been sometimes it's been very frustrating.
Priceville census in the 1850s designated black people as colored. There'd be a C. And then when you look at a following census, maybe the 61 or the 71, they had changed to Irish or some other ethnic group within the community. Well, that's not as curious as it might seem. Once again, we have to go back to what color is black.
I was a very angry black person because of my color. And because everywhere I went, I felt I either had to wear a sign or I should get a T-shirt made up. So say the thing of passing, I never entertained it because of my makeup. I loved my family and I could never ever be apart from them.
You know, all of these things are logical if we simply take the time to think about them. And if someone were to designate you an Irishman in a place where being C-colored wasn't necessarily a positive advantage, you'd leave it that way.
Denying our past is a dangerous thing, and we've had people in this community that have spent their entire lives in the closet hiding their own family histories to the point where it's been detrimental to the entire community.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if the desecration of tombstones in Ontario was sometimes done for the same reason, so that nobody would know that great aunt Clara was part black. It's not excusable. It's not acceptable. To me, it's not even understandable, but we know it happens.
That which was tragedies can have steps to be corrected. Therefore, I ask that you will guide our minds of discovery. Amen. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. God bless you. Bless you, sir, and team. Amen.
Most of them would have been marked with wood, and like our other pioneers' cemeteries. And the wood is long since gone and rotted away. And it would be a rare thing to have a tombstone.
This is important to us. Others can go and they can walk to their cemeteries and touch their stones, and we can't. So our objective is to provide our history. If the stones were placed on the sites with names, then names are to be seen. So we're just reclaiming those stones so that people can actually touch the stone and read the names, and perhaps we can find the rest of our people.
With the wife and I, we talk of relations, and some of them are getting pretty close, so we don't want this to happen to our children. But we want them to know who they are, where they came from, and stuff like this. We're about, third cousin? And then we quit?
Yeah, because you see, the Morgans was in his family, and the Morgans are in mine. We said, so we thought we better find out who's who, you know.
Definitely everyone is, you know, for recovering tombstones, but why would there be tombstones 4 feet down? We're hoping to find maybe some pieces or half of one. That would be nice to have one, you know, at least you can identify the name and take it from there.
We found 4 of them in a stone pile.
Pieces.
Now, the stone pile to me is the most natural. Being a farmer's daughter, I know that when the farmer goes out in the field in the spring, as my brother says, the stones are the first crop, you pitch them into a pile. And that's exactly what happened here.
We got involved in this project because one of my former students, Carolyn Smarts, has an interest in the black experience in Canada. This project was mentioned, and I said, well, she said, can you get involved? And I said, sure, we'll be happy to come up and lend our archaeological expertise to see what we can do to establish if there's a presence of gravestones and things like that on the site.
We were to limit our excavations to a very specific set of holes in the ground. We weren't to excavate large areas of the property. And the objective was to locate the tombstones. And once we located them, we were to stop.
I felt very strongly about going in, and then when I was there, I was rather upset because I knew they would not find anything. Half that stuff isn't there because it's under a pile of stones and on the road and people's houses and different places. And I just felt I was rather upset. I thought to myself, why bother digging? There's nothing. You're not going to find nothing.
The step we took yesterday is a step towards the reclamation of this site, and I'd be remiss if I said I was anything but disappointed, but at the same time, we knew it was a long shot.
There are stories.
Oh, there's always stories.
But nobody says I have one.
But if they did disappear somewhere, it's hard to say where they disappeared to.
Like they say, they're in so-and-so's garage, and there's some in somebody's basement. An elderly man told me that we're buried under the road. It says your people's under the road. And that really made me feel, I don't want to talk about it, but it seems so funny, you know. I guess they're getting older and that they know there was some wrong done and they're trying to right in themselves, you know. So I gotta give them credit for that. Yeah.
This year we received another anonymous letter. In 1999, in June, my father called me and said there was some mail for me at his house. And he lives east of Flusherton. I went there with some anticipation, excitement, because he didn't tell me what it was. And the letter basically is an anonymous note indicating that I was told some 65 or more years ago that when Bill Reed plowed up the cemetery for a potato patch, that he took the stones and floored his stable with them. I understand that he later ran cement over them. It's not signed or dated, but that is the essence of the letter from 1999.
Back then, people didn't have a lot of money. So you didn't think of going to the store to buy a patio stone like you would now, or putting cement down. There just wasn't the money to do it. So you used what you had available. And also there were a few in the basement of the home. I think there was only 2 or 3 stones in the basement of the house. You think it was 3?
Yeah. They were placed just in the dirt, so I guess if it was wet or that you could walk on these stones.
Well, sometimes we had water in the basement. Yeah. We needed them to walk on to get from one board to the next, sort of thing. Yeah. Because we had wide planks down there, if you recall, to walk across to the potato bin, for instance, or where the apples were, things like that.
We have to hunt and see if we can, and see where our ancestors are. So we're going to do our best. Everyone included are going to do our best to try and find them, to give peace where peace belongs.
I'm a speaker for the dead because they're still alive. There are millions of nameless, faceless people gathered around me on a daily basis, and it is my responsibility to give them a face, to give them a voice, to help the world understand that even if we are broken, even if we are disrespected, we can pull ourselves together and survive.
If, on this one little corner in Grey County, if the lies that have kept it from being public knowledge are multiplied by all the small corners across Canada, then is there much of our history that can be considered true and fair?